Hi, I'm excited today to be sharing lessons from Matthew 9 and Luke 7. Now, some of the stories let's read here we've read elsewhere. So, what I'm doing is just picking out some of the things that stood out to me in Matthew's account. So, for example, the story of the paralytic man with great friends. Remember how that story and how I felt about that story? I still feel about that story, which was in Luke 5 and Mark 2. But here, Matthew didn't actually name the friends. He just said some people brought the man to Jesus. So, um, obviously, I've talked about the different lenses, but here I'm picking up that Matthew was just, writing as he saw. And he also said that after Jesus healed him, he jumped up and went home, and fear swept through the crowd. Now, unlike Luke and Mark's accounts, who both mentioned that great rejoicing followed this, I believe that the fear that Matthew was talking about here was that fear of awe and delight. And it was the fear of the Lord which inspires awe and delight. So it wasn't fear as in, oh, who's this guy? I thought it was very cool that Matthew, while writing about himself, because remember we're reading the book of Matthew, but in 9 to 13, he called that chapter Jesus Calls Matthew. Or perhaps it wasn't him, could have been the people. But then I want to believe that it's him, and it was cool that he was talking about himself as, in his story, giving himself a name in the story, not Jesus called me. Now, from Matthew's account, it appeared that the woman with the issue of blood wasn't immediately healed, like we read in the previous one. She wasn't healed immediately she touched the cloak, because in 22 it says, Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, "Daughter, be encouraged. Your faith has made you well." And the woman was healed at that moment. So now we are seeing different views and different takes on this. There's also arguments as to whether Jairus' daughter was dead at the point, or whether she was dead or at the point of death when Jesus reached her. And even when you compare this to the other gospels, you see, because some said, she was dead, but nevertheless, Jesus gave her back the fullness of life. Whether she was dead or she was on the brink of death, Jesus gave her back the fullness of life. He was really just on an amazing healing spree. Now, that being said, the temple leader, I believe, so I believe that Matthew was a bit vague about the temple leader in the synagogue earlier in the chapters, but then other gospels described him as Jairus, but he didn't actually name Jairus here. I just needed to point that out. But yes, back to what I was saying. Jesus was really on an amazing healing spree in these chapters. He was healing. He healed the blind man, the demon-possessed mute, and the woman with the issue of blood and all. But what stood out to me here was that he healed people who had faith, who engaged their faith to receive their healing, which is like the woman with the issue of blood, and the blind men who came to him. But he also healed people who didn't have faith and couldn't ask anything from him. They weren't even there to ask of him, like Jairus' daughter and the widow of Nain. He just healed them out of the goodness of his heart, of who he was, of him being the healer. So that actually was something that stood out to me. That so engaging faith can get you healing, but it's not the only thing. Jesus can also heal you. You know what I mean? And the woman with the alabaster box. Now, that's a very popular story. And before now, I used to think it was Mary of Bethany. But actually, it's not. This is a different woman and shouldn't be confused. Mary of Bethany will anoint him also, but it's very important that we don't mix them up. I used to before I read this, before I read this, and because I've actually heard it preached that she was the same person. So my takeaway from here is that it's important to read the word for yourself and to understand it, because guess what? Sometimes preachers and pastors do make mistakes as well. So that's a key point and a key thing that I took away from these chapters. Now here's my hashtag getting to know God lesson. Jesus's necessity for every healing Jesus is necessary for every healing. He's the active ingredient in all the cases. Whether he said your faith has healed you, to the person's faith has come to those who who came into contact with him, but he also heals those who don't come into contact with him, and also heals those who don't have faith. There's no hard and fast rule for healing. It's all down to a relationship with God who is compassionate and loving. Faith on its own cannot heal unless it is placed in Jesus, and a God-honoring faith needs to be placed in Jesus, and that is worship. So a God-honoring faith is worship. I hope this makes sense, because when I wrote it, it did. But then I hope you get the gist of it. So Jesus is the active ingredient in every healing. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thank you for joining me today. I had a great time sharing this with you, and I look forward to doing the same tomorrow, God willing. God bless you. See you tomorrow. Bye.